The Arctic Ocean, a desolate expanse of icy water shrouded in perpetual twilight, a hostile environment, unforgiving and vast. It was here, in this frozen wasteland, that a lifeline was forged. A lifeline to a nation locked in a desperate struggle for survival. From 1941 to 1945, a relentless campaign was waged in the Arctic. Allied convoys, braving treacherous seas and relentless enemy attacks, sailed from Britain and Iceland to the northern ports of the Soviet Union. Their cargo vital supplies, munitions and raw materials. Their mission to keep the Soviet war machine running. These were the Arctic convoys, a testament to human courage and resilience. Thousands of sailors facing unimaginable hardships answered the call of duty. They sailed into the teeth of the Arctic storms, knowing that death lurked beneath the waves and in the skies above. This is their story. The Arctic Circle, a place of extremes, where the sun barely rises in winter, casting long shadows across a frozen world, where temperatures plummet to unimaginable depths, turning seawater into slush, where the wind howls like a banshee, whipping up monstrous waves that could swallow a ship whole. For the sailors of the Arctic convoys, the environment itself was a formidable enemy. Frostbite was a constant threat, gnawing at exposed flesh, turning fingers and toes black with gangrene. The biting wind chilled them to the bone, piercing through layers of clothing. And always there was the ice. Icebergs, some larger than city blocks, drifted silently through the fog, waiting to rip through a ship's hull. Pack ice, treacherous and ever-shifting, could trap a vessel in its icy grip, crushing it like an eggshell. The Arctic Ocean was a graveyard of ships, and the sailors knew that they were sailing into a frozen hell. But the Arctic elements were not the only danger that lurked in those icy waters. The convoys faced a relentless enemy in the form of German U-boats, surface raiders and Luftwaffe bombers. The U-boats, like wolves of the sea, hunted in packs, picking off stragglers and launching torpedo attacks from the depths. Their commanders, skilled and ruthless, knew the Arctic waters well. They used the long nights and frequent storms to their advantage, striking without warning and disappearing back into the depths. The Luftwaffe, operating from bases in Norway, launched bombing raids on the convoys, their Stuka dive bombers screaming down from the sky. The sailors, exposed on the decks of their ships, fought back with anti-aircraft guns, their tracer fire painting streaks of light across the dark sky. The Battle of the Atlantic was fought on many fronts, but the Arctic convoys faced some of the most brutal and unforgiving conditions. The ships that sailed in the Arctic convoys were a motley collection of vessels, many of them old and ill-suited for the harsh conditions. There were destroyers and corvettes, tasked with protecting the merchant ships that carried the vital supplies. There were tankers, laden with fuel for the Soviet war machine. And there were the Liberty ships, mass-produced cargo vessels that formed the backbone of the convoys. For many of the sailors, especially the young men who had never seen combat before, the Arctic convoys were a baptism by ice. They endured long hours of back-breaking work, chipping ice from the decks, manning guns in the freezing cold, and living in cramped and damp quarters. Sleep was a luxury, often interrupted by the bone-jarring explosions of depth charges or the deafening roar of aircraft engines. The constant threat of attack, the unforgiving weather, and the sheer isolation of the Arctic took a heavy toll on the sailors, both physically and mentally. Section 5. The Cruel Sea. The Battle of the Barents Sea, fought in December 1942, was a prime example of the ferocity of the Arctic War. A German task force, led by the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, intercepted a convoy bound for the Soviet Union. The British destroyers, hopelessly outgunned, charged into battle, their crews fighting with incredible courage and determination. They launched torpedo attacks, their weapons narrowly missing the German cruiser. They laid down smoke screens, shielding the merchant ships from the enemy's guns. The battle raged for hours, a chaotic melee of gunfire, explosions and blinding snow squalls. In the end, the German attack was repulsed, but not without cost. Several ships were sunk, and hundreds of sailors perished in the icy waters. Section 6. A desperate game of cat and mouse. The Arctic convoys were a desperate game of cat and mouse, with the Allies trying to outmaneuver and outrun the German hunters. The convoys relied on a combination of speed, secrecy, and air cover to reach their destination. The Royal Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy provided escorts for the convoys, their ships hunting for U-boats and engaging enemy aircraft. The Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm flew reconnaissance missions, searching for signs of enemy activity. But the Germans were relentless, using long-range aircraft and intercepted radio transmissions to track the convoy's movements. The vastness of the Arctic Ocean made it impossible to provide constant air cover, and the convoys were often vulnerable to attack. Section 7. Unsung Heroes of the Arctic. Among the many heroes of the Arctic convoys were the merchant seamen who manned the cargo ships. They were civilians, many of them volunteers, who braved the dangers of the Arctic to deliver vital supplies to the Soviet Union. They were not trained for combat, but they faced enemy fire with stoicism and courage. They worked tirelessly to keep their ships afloat, often in the face of overwhelming odds. And they endured the same hardships as their naval counterparts: the bitter cold, the constant threat of attack, and the ever-present danger of the sea. The merchant seamen of the Arctic convoys were unsung heroes, their contribution to the war effort often overlooked. But without their bravery and sacrifice, the Soviet Union might have collapsed, and the course of the war could have been very different. Section 8. A Fragile Lifeline, forged in courage. The Arctic convoys were a vital lifeline to the Soviet Union, a nation locked in a desperate struggle for survival against Nazi Germany. The supplies delivered by the convoys played a crucial role in the Soviet war effort, helping to stem the tide of the German advance and ultimately contributing to the Allied victory. The convoys delivered millions of tons of cargo to the Soviet Union, including tanks, aircraft, ammunition, fuel, food, and medical supplies. These supplies helped to equip and sustain the Red Army, which bore the brunt of the fighting on the Eastern Front. The Arctic convoys were a testament to the strength of the Allied alliance, a symbol of the commitment of Britain, the United States, and Canada to supporting their Soviet ally. They were a lifeline of hope, a tangible demonstration that the Soviet Union was not alone in its fight against Nazi tyranny. Section 9. The tide turns. As the war progressed, the tide began to turn in favor of the Allies. The German U-boat threat was gradually contained, and the Luftwaffe's grip on the skies over the Arctic weakened. The introduction of new technologies, such as escort carriers and long-range aircraft, helped to tip the balance in favor of the Allies. The convoys became larger and more frequent, and the losses inflicted by the Germans declined. Despite these successes, the Arctic convoys remained a perilous undertaking. The weather conditions were as unforgiving as ever, and the German forces, though weakened, were still capable of inflicting heavy casualties. Section 10. A legacy etched in ice. The Arctic convoys were one of the most dangerous and challenging campaigns of World War II. They were a testament to the courage, resilience, and sacrifice of the sailors and merchant seamen who braved the perils of the Arctic Ocean. The convoys played a crucial role in the Allied victory, helping to sustain the Soviet war effort and contribute to the defeat of Nazi Germany. The legacy of the Arctic convoys is etched in the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean, a reminder of the sacrifices made by a generation of sailors who faced unimaginable hardships with extraordinary courage and determination. Their story is a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can be found in the most unlikely of places.